Hey Steve, how you doing today?
Good, Doc. How you doing?
I'm freezing my cute little butt off, but other than that, doing great.
Awesome.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Mentors on Tap. Today we're going to talk a little bit about technical SEO, uh, a topic that seems to be controversial for some because there doesn't seem to be a lot of agreement about what actually falls within the purview of a tech SEO. And basically, I kind of take a catch-all view of it. I think anything that can affect the structure of the site, the way it serves in terms of time and image and responsiveness, and anything that can be technically done on the site or the server to make for a better user experience, a better search experience. I throw underneath that umbrella. That includes going HTTPS, responsive, your basic site architecture, all the many, many things that can affect your page load speed, your internationalization, like hreflang, uh, any semantic markup you may be doing, whether it be schema, JSON LD, your canonicalization, even your sitemaps. Okay, I think that all those things fall into tech SEO. I don't know if Steve agrees with that or not, but I'll shut up and we'll find out.
I do to a certain extent. I look at it as less as a user experience kind of issue and more as a site performance issue. User experience starts branching off into more web design, user experience type of categories, which start running you down a completely different set of rabbit holes. When I look at technical SEO, I'm looking at, like you said, navigational structure, site structure, server performance, speed, those types of issues that we know Google looks at and cares about. And that could include, including running your what do I want to say, your different types of tracking, making sure that everything's installed properly, because without any of that, you're not going to know what's going on anyway. It can just, the technical side is almost a programmer level, and that opens up another huge pile of worms is, do SEOs need to know how to program? And in my experience, the really good ones do, or at least understand it fluently enough to be able to talk to a developer with some level of intelligence. And I found that the guys who are just surface level SEOs don't understand the underlying code and don't understand why things are constructed the way they are. They're just repeating what they read on somebody else's blog post and then assume somebody else can sort it all out without being able to verify it for themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There was a time several years ago when I didn't know how to code, and I learned SEO pretty much in terms of trying to learn how search works and trying to figure out how the content and the basic site architecture should be to conform to all the standards and make a site appear well in search and be usable for the users. And I didn't know how to code at all. So I had a little bit different point of view because I felt like I was doing some portion of SEO, okay, but I couldn't write my way out of a wet sack. And over the years, as I started specializing more on the technical side, of course, I had to learn how to code, and it's been enjoyable. And I can honestly say I certainly feel like I'm much more competent now that I'm comfortable. I've been comfortable with HTML for some time, but now I started playing with PHP and of course CSS. I feel like I'm much more capable now. And one of the things, our friend Marge Wyatt, a long time ago, beat me up many times about plugins, and she convinced me 100% on one thing: anything that can be hard coded as opposed to being a plugin should be hard coded. And I do that a lot. And a lot of times I'll take a plugin that I like the function of, and I'll dissect it, and I'll figure out how to code that into my child theme and get rid of the plugin. And it just speeds things up tremendously.
Yeah.
And it's been very educational. And so, I certainly do agree that the better SEOs are going to have to know how to, at the very least, read code. Now, I won't sit down and try to code something in PHP. I'll do edits and whatnot, but I'm not going to try to write a PHP script or a JavaScript because I'm just not at that level. But I can look at it and say, okay, I see what this is doing, and this is where it's doing it, and this is how this would have to be modified. If I need something written, I'm going to go find a pro and have them do it. But
right.
if you can't,
copy and paste programming from GitHub is a
yeah, but if you can't at least look at it and understand what it's doing, you're working with one hand behind your back. And earlier when I was talking about user experience, I was thinking more along the lines really there in terms of responsiveness. Is this going to disappear and be sadly missed on a mobile device, or is it going to be way down at the bottom of the page where the poor schmuck will never find it? That aspect of the tech, because those are things that you can do in tech SEO to make sure that if it's critical that your categories be visible, you don't want them all the way down at the footer on an iPhone. And there are ways to fix that so that they'll be visible higher on the page. So that was the only extent that I felt usability really works into it.
Now it's important to make sure that, because without the technical side of your SEO program in place, nothing else you do is going to really matter much, because you'll be trapping the bots into endless loops. You're going to have 301 redirects that are 8, 10, 12, 20 levels deep, which is something that so many people forget about. They'll make a site change, do their 301s, then they'll make another site change and add more 301s instead of editing the ones that are already there.
Yep.
So they wind up with this great big long nest, and we know that the bots aren't going to go very deep. They'll go deeper than I thought they would, but we still know that at a certain point, the 301s are going to cause you to lose a lot of potential indexing and crawl budget. And those types of issues just have to be resolved. And if they're not resolved properly up front, then you're either on a Windows server or you're going to struggle going forward.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that have to be right before you're going to rank. The site it has to be functional, obviously, but your average user might look at a site on his desktop and say, "Oh, this is great. I love this," and Google may have it on page 812 because it's just terrible. And I know I've built sites like that, 15, 20 years ago, playing around with things like Front Page and Microsoft Publisher that had so much bloat. And I found Band-Aids to make things look the way I wanted to look, and it looked great on Firefox. But you go to Internet Explorer, and it wouldn't even display.
Right.
And there's a lot of guys out there calling themselves developers that are doing that kind of garbage. I never did.
Of all the technical SEO issues you've come across, which is your biggest pet peeve that you see?
I guess, I'm going to say the many things that play into page speed. Somebody sends you a URL and you get a 37-second page load on their home page.
The guys loading 2 meg hero images on the top of their website before anything else.
Well, yeah, they'll load a 3400 by 4200 image up into their media library, and then they'll show it as a thumbnail.
Right.
And loading up high-res images for something that's only going to show low res on the browser anyway is just ridiculous. For downloads, okay, fine. If you're a photographer and you're selling downloads, that's one thing, but that's a download file. That's not a display file. You know, I had a site the other day I looked at that actually had 802 calls. It was a 72-second page load on the homepage, 802 calls with 37 plugins active. Okay. And it's just, that's the kind of thing, you know, page speed is important everywhere these days. I mean, even on a desktop, it's critical that, you know, you're going to chase people off. They say after 3 seconds, you're losing, you know, a major portion of your users anyway. But when you get into mobile, it becomes super critical. So I get the page speed is my biggest pet peeve. You know, I have yet to find a website, a WordPress website that I can't get to consistently load in 2 seconds or less. Okay, didn't matter what theme, didn't matter what they're doing, as long as it wasn't a high res image. You know, eventually you can go through it. You can get a WordPress site to load in around 2 seconds or under. And so finding a 2.5 minute page load on a WordPress site, which by the way was hosted by GoDaddy, I thought I'd throw that little plug in there for those idiots. But it wasn't all GoDaddy's fault, but whoever was doing the editing had gotten into it, so, you know, made a lot of changes. But that's my biggest pet peeve. But there's so many things that play into that. You know.
Right.
How about yours?
Mine's almost always falls back on people using XML sitemaps to solve the issues of crappy navigation. I mean, sitemaps were introduced years ago simply because so many people were building such horrible websites that the bots couldn't crawl them properly.
Yeah.
So search engines said, here, use this format to tell us where your pages are so we can find the damn things. And so many people just decided that that was the solution, that they forget that if you have good navigation and good site structure, you don't need an XML sitemap.
Yep. And
so when I see these rubber stamp proposals from SEO saying, well, you know, the problem with your website is you don't have an XML sitemap. It's like, well, no, I can guarantee you that's not the problem. The problem is probably their horrible navigation. You're just going to stick a Band-Aid on it using a plugin and then charge them $1,000 and say thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been my biggest thing. It's like, if you can't sort your navigation out, then it's never really going to function well as a website anyway, because your users are going to hate it because they're not going to be able to find what they're looking for.
Yep.
So that's usually where I fall in on that.
About
site speed close second, because where we live out in Tennessee, we get most of our internet connection through 2 pieces of string and a fishing hook. So anything faster is good.
Sounds kind of like my Taco ISP.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an awful lot that can be done to speed, and it's, you know, that's definitely my biggest pet peeve, and that's also the one that I most often see as a quick fix. You know, something that can have some major impact. And, you know, I'm doing a site right now for a client that was loading in 7-8 seconds, and we're going to have them down around a second and a half, because it's a very light load. It's just he had a bunch of little things, you know, and it's just like SEO in general. It used to be, you know, you buy some links, or you get some guest blog posts up or whatever, and you'd rank. And these days, there aren't any big hits, standalone big hits. You've got to do a bunch of things. And the same with speed. You know, there's normally, sometimes you'll go to a site and they'll just have these massive images and you can reduce their page load by 90% by fixing just that one issue, but that's rare. Usually it's a whole bunch of little things that need to be tweaked.
Usually if it's a single issue, it's somebody in the robots.txt file doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, technical SEO is a huge topic. I mean, we could do a whole series on it and dive deep into it, and maybe that's something we can look at in the future. But if your website's struggling and you can't figure out why, that's the first step. Is start looking at all the technical side of things. Look at your navigation, look at your speed, look at your robots.txt. Just solve those issues, which are all relatively easy to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And then start looking to see if your site still struggles. And then you can start looking at more important issues, more broad scale issues like content and link building. Everybody hates that, but without links, people aren't going to find your site anyway. So who cares?
Yep. Well, that brings us up to about the 15-minute mark. We don't want to bore our people to death, but I would love to invite some discussion. Anybody that feels like we left something, we didn't mention everything, obviously, but I think we hit the major things. And anybody that has a feeling that something that we mentioned definitely doesn't belong, hey, pipe up. We were wrong once. We waited too long to start getting this. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
We'll see you guys next show.
Yep. See you at the next one.